Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Going Govinda ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shishi Koti Nitai Mata Shishi ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. Reading from Shri Prabhupada Leela Amrita, chapter entitled India Unifying ISKCON. As the festival drew near, some of the sannyasis arrived, hoping to associate more intimately with Srila Prabhupada before the flood of devotees began. A major topic of discussion among the sannyasis was the controversy over the role of grihastha men in ISKCON and the influence of women and children on the sannyasis and brahmacharis, those in the renounced orders. Some of the sannyasis were suggesting that ISKCON should be more structured to separate the renounced orders and the preachers from the householders. They began airing their views before Srila Prabhupada, who then guided them. On one morning walk, Jayapataka Swami inquired about the standards required before a man could take sannyas. To become sannyasi, Prabhupada replied, the other three processes are there to become brahmachari, to become grihastha, and to become vanaprastha, stage by stage. But if one is able, he can take sannyas, and that competency is also very simple. If you become fully Krishna conscious, then you can immediately become competent. Brahma Bhuya Kalpati. As soon as you fully engage with yourself in Krishna consciousness, then immediately you become more than a sannyasi. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 9, Text 18. So I'll just read it myself. Vrishamarsha Rushvesha Rabasa Valasita Brukuti Vitapa Kutila Damstaranikshana Bhayanaka Vadana Hantu Kamavedam Mahata Hasam Ati Sam Rambena Vimunchanti Tatat Utpatya Papiyashyam Dushtananam Tenai Vasina Vivikrana Shirshanam Galat Shravantam Ashrig Asavam Attasunyam Sahaganena Nipiyati Panamadha Vivalochaishtaram Swa Parshadai Saha Yajago Nanartai Cha Vijahara Cha Shira Kanduka Lilaya. Brisham, very highly. Amarsha, intolerance of the offences. Rosha, in anger. Avesha, of her absorption. Rabasa Vilasita, expanded by the force. Brukuti, of her eyebrows, Vitapa, the branches, Kutila, curved, Damstra, teeth, Aruna Ikshana, of reddish eyes, Atopa, by the agitation, Ati, very much, Bhayanaka, fearful, Vadana, having a face, Hantukama, desirous to destroy, Iva, as if idam, this universe, Maha Atam Hasam, a greatly fearful laugh, Ati, great, Samrambena, because of anger, Vimunjanti, releasing, Tata, from that altar, Utpatya, coming forth, Papiyasam, of all the sinful, Dushtanam, great offenders, Tena Eva Asina, by that same chopper, Vivrikna, separated, Sirshnam, whose heads, Galat, from the neck, Shravantam, oozing out, Ashrik Asavam, the blood compared to an intoxicating beverage, Ati Ushnam, very hot, Saha, with, Ganena, her associates, Nipiya, drinking, Atipana, from drinking so much, Mada, by intoxication, Vivala, overwhelmed, Uchai Taram, very loudly, Swaparshadai, her own associates, Saha, with, Jago, sang, Nanartha, danced, Ja, also, Vijahara, played, Ja, also, Shirakanduka, using the heads as balls, Lilaya, by sports. Translation. Intolerant of the offences committed, the infuriated goddess Kali flashed her eyes and displayed her fierce curved teeth. Her reddish eyes glowed, and she displayed her fearsome features. She assumed a frightening body, as if she were prepared to destroy the entire creation. Leaping violently from the altar, she immediately decapitated all the rogues and thieves with the very sword with which they had intended to kill Jad Bharat. She then began to drink the hot blood that flowed from the necks of the beheaded rogues and thieves, as if this blood were liquor. Indeed, she drank this intoxicant with her associates, who were witches and female demons. Becoming intoxicated with this blood, they all began to sing very loudly and dance as though prepared to annihilate the entire universe. At the same time, they began to play with the heads of the rogues and thieves, tossing them about as if they were balls. Please repeat. Intolerant of the offences committed, the infuriated goddess Kali flashed her eyes and displayed her fierce curved teeth. Her reddish eyes glowed, and she displayed her fearsome features. She assumed a frightening body, as if she were prepared to destroy the entire creation. Leaping violently from the altar, she immediately decapitated all the rogues and thieves with the very sword with which they had intended to kill Jad Bharat. She then began to drink the hot blood that flowed from the necks of the beheaded rogues and thieves, as if this blood were liquor. Indeed, she drank this intoxicant with her associates, who were witches and female demons. Becoming intoxicated with this blood, they all began to sing very loudly and dance as though prepared to annihilate the entire universe. At the same time, they began to play with the heads of the rogues and thieves, tossing them about as if they were balls. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is evident from this verse that the devotees of Goddess Kali are not at all favoured by her. It is Goddess Kali's work to kill and punish the demons. Goddess Kali Durga engages in decapitating many demons, dacoits and other unwanted elements in society. Neglecting Krishna consciousness, foolish people try to satisfy the goddess by offering her many abominable things. But ultimately, when there is a little discrepancy in this worship, the goddess punishes the worshipper by taking his life. Demoniac people worship Goddess Kali to obtain some material benefit, but they are not excused of the sins performed in the name of worship. To sacrifice a man or animal before the deity is specifically forbidden. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitanjana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I was just thinking that if somebody were to just open the Bhagavatam, somebody new who'd never actually read anything about Krishna consciousness, and they opened the Bhagavatam at this verse, it would be quite kind of horrifying to read, because it's a display of like horror and shock and all these kind of symptoms, you know, how Goddess Kali is destroying these demons. So although Jad Bharat here, so Jad Bharat's been captured by these thieves and rogues, and although he's actually capable of freeing himself from these rogues, because he's quite strong, he doesn't do so. He just accepts, because he's very detached. Jad Bharat's very detached. He's not even interested in protecting himself from the dacoits, even though he is capable of doing that. Because he's just depending on Krishna for protection. And I mean, we can't really imitate this. You know, Jad Bharat was so detached from the bodily concept, he understood completely that he wasn't the body, and he was ready to accept whatever came, not afraid of death. And just like also similar, like Prahlad Maharaj, whenever he was threatened in so many ways and put into so many dangerous situations, he didn't retaliate. He just accepted, and he just took shelter of the holy name of Krishna, and he was saved every time. So if the Lord wants to protect us, then no one can kill us, and if the Lord wants to kill us, then no one can protect us. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Marabi Rakobi Yo Ichato Mahara Nitya Dasa Pratitva Adhikara. So he says, Lord, I'm your eternal servant. If you like, you can kill me, or if you like, you can protect me. In any case, I'm fully surrendered to you. So this was the mood of Jad Bharat. He didn't protest, he didn't retaliate, he didn't try to protect himself. He just accepted complete surrender to Krishna. Whatever Krishna wanted, then he was ready to accept that. And the devotees of Goddess Kali, although they're thinking they're actually pleasing the goddess by offering these sacrifices of animals and humans, they're actually not, as it's explained here. Actually, she's not pleased by this, and she kills and punishes the demons. As soon as there's some discrepancy in their worship, then they get a big reaction. So generally people worship the demigods to fulfill material desires and quickly get material benefit, and this is their reason. There's the dacoits, they're worshipping Goddess Kali for some material benefit, and thinking that they're going to get some great benediction from the Goddess Kali by doing this worship. But here we can see that the reward was actually death at our hands. And actually this was for their benefit, because these dacoits, they're very demonic. They're actually committing great offences against Goddess Kali, because they were sacrificing a great devotee of the Lord. And because Goddess Kali, she's also a devotee of Krishna, then she's not going to tolerate another devotee being hurt or killed in any way. So we can see here that the goddess, instead of being pleased with their sacrifice of Jadbharat, she actually wanted to protect Jadbharat, and in doing so she killed the demons because they were offenders of a great devotee. So this is actually how anger can be used in Krishna's service. Here Goddess Kali is using her anger in Krishna's service. So Goddess Kali actually represents the external potency of Maya, and so she's a very powerful personality. And so we can see in this pastime that although it's quite horrific to read it, it's because it's connected to Krishna, because Jadbharat is Krishna's devotee, then it's actually purifying. And because Goddess Kali is doing these activities to please Krishna, she's protecting Jadbharat from the dacoits, then it's actually Krishna conscious. And we can see that there's all the secondary rasas are in this sort of pastime. Generally, there's 12 rasas as explained in Nectar Devotion. So can anyone remember the 5 primary rasas?
Friendship.
5.
Parenthood, servant, lover, and neutral.
Okay, so there's the neutrality, dasi ras, servitude, sakya ras is friendship, vatsalya, parental, madhurya is conjugal love, but there's also 7 secondary rasas. Can anyone remember any of them?
Ghastliness, chivalry, humor.
Yeah, comedy, laughter. And so that's laughter, chivalry, ghastliness. There's also astonishment, and also anger and dread. And this says compassion, but it means something like lamentation. So, so we can see that, and Prabhupada actually said that we can't really enjoy anything without these 12 rasas. Somewhere there has to be these 12 rasas to actually enjoy. So we can see in different pastimes Krishna displays anger, like Lord Nrsingadev, Lord Varaha, and Krishna himself, Lord Ram. There is a display of anger as well. It's not just the 5 primary rasas, there's also secondary rasas involved. And also the devotees, like here Goddess Kali, displaying this secondary rasa. There's horror as well, like ghastliness, dread, anger. So it's all, there is pleasure even in anger. And there's even pleasure in horror, because otherwise they wouldn't be making horror movies if there was no pleasure in it. So there must be some pleasure. For certain persons, horror is actually a pleasure. Anger is actually a pleasure. But for example, for a Kshatriya to actually fight in a battle is actually pleasure. That's their thing, you know. So they get pleasure out of anger in a battle. And we can see Hanuman, even Arjuna, and Krishna was inciting Arjuna to become angry to fight, because we can't fight unless we're angry. So that anger is if it's used in Krishna's service, it's actually devotional service. You see, so it's if Krishna's in the center, then even when we use anger, it's actually beneficial, and it's actually part of devotional service. So. And for a Kshatriya, they have to use anger to fight and to protect the citizens. So there is a place for anger. And and also if there is love for somebody, then there's also a display of anger, because when we see that person that we love doing something that's going to harm themselves, then we can become angry and try to stop them. So anger can be a part of a loving relationship as well. So all these different rasas are there, as we can see here. Goddess Kali is displaying this. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining how the worshippers of Goddess Kali, they generally they're advised, if they want to eat meat, to actually sacrifice a goat or something like that in front of Goddess Kali, and in that way they can, take responsibility for their action, and also understand that they will also be killed in the same way in the next life. So it's to help them to understand, because they haven't got enough intelligence to understand, well, why bother killing it? If I'm going to be killed in the same way in my next life, what's the point of killing it? They still do it because it's a concession for them to eat meat. But Srila Prabhupada says that this concession is there because then the mode of ignorance, a lot of people, they don't understand the higher values of life. So for them, if they have to eat meat, at least they'll do it in a systematic way, and in a way that's acceptable in certain Vedic Puranas. But the slaughtering of animals in general is forbidden. Is considered not acceptable, and that's another reason why Lord Buddha came, because the persons in that time were, killing animals whimsically. Well, they were just using the text of the Shastras to substantiate why they were killing the animals. But they were doing it just too much. They were not really understanding that the higher values of the Vedas. They were just killing animals. So that's why Lord Buddha had to appear to stop the animal killing, the animal slaughtering, and he had to do that in such a way to stop them from following the Vedic scriptures. And that's why they're considered atheists. So it's such it stops people from actually understanding the higher values of life and to understanding God. This killing of animals is not the brain is not able to understand higher things by this. So that's why it's considered such a negative thing in the Shastras. Because there's such bad karma involved. So, and here, they're not even just killing an animal in front of Goddess Kali, they're killing a human being, and who's actually a great devotee. So it's actually the worst thing they could have done. And just so they can get some material benefit, they're prepared to perform such acts. So, and then they will have to suffer some reaction because of it as well. So it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. That's why Krishna says that the less intelligent worship the demigods, and the fruits are limited and temporary. So Krishna doesn't recommend it in the Bhagavad Gita, and he says that the destination of the demigod worshippers is the heavenly planets of the demigods, where they go to the demigods. But then they also have to come back again to planet Earth and suffer again. So there's no real end to their misery. Whether they go from the lowest planet to the highest planet, the material world, Krishna says, is temporary and full of misery. So the only way to get out of this cycle and the material atmosphere is by devotional service. And that way we can enter the spiritual realm. And that's the whole purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam, is to help us on the path to pure devotional service. And by giving all these examples, it's showing what should be done and what should not be done in the process. Is there any questions or comments so far?
In this particular case then, we appreciate that Goddess Kali got quite angry because it was Jagannath Priya, but it says in the third book that even over small discrepancies. So why is it that she's so, seems like she's even more angry to the ones that are worshipping her than the ones that aren't, and since they make a slight mistake she comes down on them really heavily rather than, because it seems with Lord Shiva, when he has all the heart problems, and he seems to kind of accommodate them, you know, and just accept, well, that's the type of people they are, and he looks after them to some degree. It doesn't not seem that way with Goddess Kali.
Yeah. Well, Goddess Kali, her Durga's like her service is to actually rectify the living entities, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a prison warden, right?
Yeah. So she's there to rectify, as like the police department. So she needs to punish the living entities so they can, come to their senses to some degree. And that's her thankless task, and that's her service. And she comes in many forms here. She says Goddess Kali, there's Durga. There's so many different forms of Durga. Maybe some more ferocious than others. I don't know. I'm not the best person to ask about these things, but I mean there is different forms of Durga, and some are more ghastly than others. So Goddess Kali is one of those forms. I think it's more ferocious, and because if you see the form, it's quite horrific looking. So it is. There may be other forms like Amba and other forms that may be more gentler. But her whole point is that she's trying to rectify the living entities, and they need rectified. So that's out of kindness that she's doing that, so they don't have to suffer in the next life. Just like corporal punishment was there, that if a person committed murder, they would get hanged and some, or killed, so they didn't have to suffer in the next life. And so it was actually for the benefit. It wasn't actually a punishment. It was for the benefit of that person that they were doing that, so that they didn't have to suffer it in the next life. So here, this is actually, she's been kind to the demons, because if they had killed Jad Bharat, they would have had to suffer so much more than what she's doing to them.
I was wondering also, part of the pastime is that they're playing, football, tossing the heads around the airball, and it seems like a regular, because they were drinking the blood and getting intoxicated on it. So, and a whole group of them had come to have a party type thing. So I just wonder, is that like when we see in Mahabharata where Krishna arranges that the personalities like Duryodhana and Karna, they die in glorious ways. They all deserve to be kind of honoured or respected with these demons, because they've done such an atrocious act. And then they got the full brunt, not only of being killed, but then of being kind of ridiculed afterwards and not showing any respect. It was very irreverent, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it's quite a scene. Imagine they made a movie of this part. It would be quite horrific to see. But yeah, it's pretty. She should go and dine out. She should be. Yeah, it's not like a general thing to read about these kind of things, but we can see how this, they're getting pleasure out of it. So anything else?
So, Srimad Bhagavatam Class, it's put forward as like the cream of Vedic literature. So, you could read the Vedic literature and decide you're going to be a Kali worshipper, or a worshipper of Indra, or Lord Rama. And the Bhagavatam lays out pastimes and to clarify the whole thing, to show you who is the boss and who are the demigods. So we become aware of the hierarchy. So in this case also, you can see that the conclusion would be, okay, no point trying to worship Goddess Kali, I'll just try and be a great devotee like Jai Bhagat, and then I'll get the blessings that way. That way she will be really pleased with me. But just focus on pleasing Krishna.
Yeah, generally, like if we read through the Bhagavatam and different stories, although the demigods are worshipped and they end up giving benedictions that are actually not beneficial for themselves or for anybody else. Like, Hiranyakashipu gets a benediction that he can't be killed in this way or that way by Lord Brahma. And Lord Shiva gives benedictions quite easily to demons as well, like to Ravana and so many others. But actually, it's not going to benefit anybody, and it's actually detrimental to a lot of people. And that's why Krishna, was it Lord Nrsimhadev chastised Lord Brahma that not to give this kind of benedictions. So that's the problem, because the demigods feel obliged, so they have to give benedictions to those who worship them, and they end up giving the wrong, being obliged to give the wrong benedictions, and then everyone has to suffer for it. So it's, but Krishna doesn't give such benedictions. If it's not going to benefit the person, he won't give it so easily. So that's why people don't like to worship Krishna, because they don't get such an easy way of fulfilling their material desires. Because Krishna isn't very, he wants the living entity to benefit, and he'll fulfill our desires in such a way that we won't desire them again. Whereas demigods will just give us what we want, and then whether we suffer or not, it's not their problem after that.
Unless the demigod is Goddess Devi.
Well,
She doesn't place it.
for this reason, but if you're worshipping Durga for some material benefit, you're likely to get some material benefits. But because here, they're attempting to kill Jagannath, and that's a different scenario. In general, the demigods fulfill desires, and they're not actually helping the living entity, because by fulfilling that desire, they're actually making them more entangled in material life. So it's actually not enabling them to get out of the material entanglement, it's actually entangling them more. So it's not really very beneficial. Whereas by serving Krishna, one becomes detached from this material world. So by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, by hearing, there's two different things that happen. One gains liberation, and one becomes attached to Krishna. So one becomes detached from material existence, and one becomes attached to Krishna. So two things happen when we hear, about Krishna's pastimes. So that's actually the process of hearing and chanting, is to get free from this material entanglement and become attached to Krishna. And it was interesting that I was reading Shuddha Bhakti Chaitanya, and Sri Maharaj is saying that the 5 potent forms of devotional service is chanting, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting the holy names, worshipping the deity, associating with devotees, and living in a holy place. And he says of the 5, the 3 most important are chanting the holy names, associating with devotees, and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And if there was a choice that you could only do one of them, then chanting the holy names is the most important out of all 5, because within chanting the holy names there's also the process of hearing and remembering. So within the very first process of chanting the holy names, we have 3. And he said that within the 5 most potent forms of devotional service, these 5, there's actually the 9 limbs of devotional service. So he didn't go into details, but if we can see, even in chanting, there's 3 processes: is hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. And in deity worship, there's like praying, offering worship. There's chanting. There's different. So within all these 5 processes, 5 potent forms of devotional service, there is the 9 limbs of devotional service contained within it. And he said that the 2 most important is chanting the holy names and associating with devotees. That's the 2 most important out of the 5. And then chanting the holy names is the most important, because that's ultimately the purifying process. And that's how our heart becomes cleansed. And so this hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is also so potent. That sound vibration is Shabda Brahma, it's a pure sound, transcendental sound, and transcendental sound liberates us from this material world and helps us to become attached to Krishna. So even although this pastime seems very gruesome and horrific, still because it's connected to Krishna and to his devotee, then it's purifying. And so it's not that we should avoid these verses, and they still have benefit. And this is actually showing how a devotee should behave, but we can get angry if Krishna is blasphemed or his devotees get blasphemed. We can actually show our anger in such circumstances. Maybe not to the extent that God is callous, but this is a bona fide. So it's not like spiritual life is just peace and there's no other rasas in it. There's all the rasas in it. Spiritual life is full of rasa. You can't just have you can't negate all these things and just pretend that spiritual life has no other tastes, And then we see that throughout Krishna's pastimes, there's all the rasas are there, and so we can't avoid it because it's part of the spiritual realm to have relationships, and these different rasas are displayed within those relationships in different degrees.
Isn't it that ghastliness and maybe surely doesn't appear Krishna comes down to the material world to engage in such, to be able to enjoy such rasas?
Well, there's ecstasies where, there's dread and fear and, ghastliness is there because it's one of the, it's like some of these symptoms are displayed in ecstasy, by the great devotees. So they are there in the spiritual world. Otherwise they can't exist here. If they're not there, then they can't exist here. This is just a perverted reflection of all the rasas in the spiritual. So there is, viewed the nectar of devotion, there is different rasas that are displayed at certain times, like dread, like the ghastly ras. There is a place for it, it's not like this kind of ghastly rasa, but you know, there is a place for it.
But there's one pastime where Krishna showed the hoo-ha, hoo-hoo, so hoo-ha, so Mother showed us, so that was a kind of ghastliness, but there's no blood involved.
Yeah,
Some dying or anything like that.
yeah, yeah. So there is a place for all the rasas there.
Also, when they took the head off the cheeky cloth merchant, that was really a gushing ghastly rasa.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Krishna does, I mean, killing all the demons in Vrindavan, that's so ghastly as well. I mean, it's not like exactly, you know, Krishna's spinning them around and he's, he puts this fist into Keshi's mouth and Agasura as well, you know, there is quite a display of ghastliness for the demons, you know. And Nrsingadev as well.
So, if you're one of the Kali was, and you're with Krishna and he does that, then I guess you just find that funny.
Well, maybe not at the time. Because the Kaurava boys are quite, you know, scared something's going to happen to Krishna, you know. So, there's a place for all these rasas anyway within Krishna's pastimes, and we're just seeing the perverted reflection of them here. But
earlier on we were saying that I thought Shrinda's question was that in the spiritual world there's no ghastness and dread. Were you saying that it's manifest in the ecstasies of the devotees? Because the pastimes with the demons, as far as I know, they're not the eternal pastimes.
yeah, but in the spiritual world, as I was saying, that, you know, there's ecstasies with these rasas, but it's not like, you know, blood and things like that. But there is some ghastly rasas, and there's dread, there's horror, you know, and there's anger, there's, you know, there is all these rasas there, just in a different way. Okay, yeah.
They said how all these things are so graphic, so just to wake us up and to be able to accept certain principles that the Bhagavatam is trying to convey, even just such great personalities, Maharaj Bharat, just falling for a deer, and now this just to wake up some vintages.
Yeah, because it's extreme examples, you know, because it has to try and drill in the point that people can actually take the point. And then if it's just like, you know, quietly done, people aren't going to get the message. So it's all examples of very extreme, you know. If you do this, this is what happens, or if you don't do this, this is what happens, you know, so that people get the message. And it's very extreme examples.
I'm a bit confused about why they would go to such extremities if it's not recommended in the scriptures. Even the demigod worship here says it's forbidden to sacrifice a man or an animal. Why couldn't they just pick some nice flowers or offer some water? I mean, obviously it's primitive, but it seems like a big... I know I've heard it even goes on. I've heard it even in India and all this and all that strange goes on. But I'm just wondering why would they do that?
Good question. I have the same question too. Maybe we can ask them. Would you have any answer to it, Joe?
Whatever, I mean, any religion becomes distorted, doesn't it, after a while? Starts off as one thing and then before you know it, they're trying this and trying the next thing, you know. I mean, first of all it was saying just use an animal, and then they decided, oh, well that means use a man animal. And so it was also you can eat vegetables, and you say, oh, fish is a sea vegetable, so you can see how they start twisting things around. And you do that for a few thousand years, and before you know it,
second.
But that is altered due to the influence of the mode of ignorance and passion, that they have a tendency to be attracted to these kind of activities rather than
Yeah, because if you read the Bhagavad Gita, and you know there's all the different modes and the foods and what in these different modes and activities in the different modes, so you can see that under the mode of ignorance, there's worship in the mode of ignorance, you know, and this is like worship in the mode of ignorance, isn't it? So it's not very sattvic. It's you know, full of dead living entities, and there's blood, and you know it's unclean. You know, like if you think about that pastime with when Krishna was getting the Rajasuya Yagya, and Krishna didn't want any, you know, some bloodshed because that would have made everything unclean, you know, for the sacrifice. So it's like when it's like mode of goodness, it's like everything should be clean, not full of blood and all these things. So this is like tamasic, you know, there's blood and dead living beings, you know. So so it's different sort of standards, and to them this is actually great, you know.
Krishna, sorry to, it's just a question continuing from that. Did they get like some kind of mercy by being obviously been heavily chastised and demons and the deserted that told them? But did they get some kind of mercy from Kali, from Goddess Kali, from being having their heads severed and stuff? Did they get purified by that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's her kind, because you know that's them getting the reaction there and then.
Yeah.
You know, if they had killed Jadbharat, they would have to suffer a lot more in hell than what they're getting there. So in one sense they're getting a light from Goddess Kali, because otherwise if they had killed Jadbharat, then they would really have had to suffer from the Yamadutas in hell for many millions of lifetimes probably. So
it's like Zergishi, all these kind of catastrophes and things that kind of like a mother's slap on the living entity trying to correct them.
yeah.
And so you've got this climate change and all sorts of things, impending catastrophes, but still people aren't awake to it, and think they can still remain complacent and continue as they are. So the most intelligent learn by hearing, but others have to feel it first.
And still they don't learn.
Yeah.
So it's like 10th class intelligence. People continue doing the wrong things, even although they're suffering, and they still don't think that, okay, let's stop doing this, it's not good. So it's like the demonic, they do horrible works meant to destroy the world. That's what the demonic do. So this is their kind of way of, they're thinking they're intelligent by doing these, but Krishna says they've no intelligence, that they're just doing horrible works meant to destroy the world. So in Krishna's eyes, they have no intelligence. So it's just everything's like opposite of what it should be. You know, vice has become virtue, and virtue has become vice. As a religion is considered religion, a religion is considered irreligion. So that's Kali, the age of Kali. Yeah, I better stop there. Thank you for the exciting, interesting discussion. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Iskon Guruvind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Govinda.
Very good.